Please, African American children and crossing over to Canaan, the journey of new teachers in diverse classrooms. And Dr. Ladson Billings, I was mentioning to them early in my doctoral program, one of our assignments here at Tennessee State back in 2015 was to come and attend a lecture that you presented on transforming urban schools, hip hop, hip hope, the R, which was in parenthesis, revolution in culturally relevant pedagogy. And you opened me up to a whole new world, even though I was a teacher of color, of also bettering my connection to my children. So it's not just a given if you're already a teacher of color. There's still some things that we can learn to kind of help us as we move forward with our children in the 21st century classroom. So I don't know if anyone has a question that they've already dropped in the chat, or if they would like to unmute themselves, then let's just get started because we only have 20 minutes.
Right.
So.
Something that we were discussing before you arrived, Dr. Ladson Billings, was that just the practical nature of this. We have a lot of classroom teachers here, especially for early elementary grades, younger children, and what it looks like to have all of these pressures put on you as a teacher with the standards that you're being asked to use or the technology. Melinda here mentioned like the different software and programs that you're required to use from your administration. So what does it look like to adapt, and how do you know what to prioritize as a culturally responsive teacher, as an anti-racist teacher? We'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, I think one of the challenges is you're being asked to include a bunch of stuff, new stuff, on an old platform. You know, if I can use a computer analogy, you're getting better word processing, better, sort of graphics and all of that kind of stuff, but you're still on Microsoft 2.0, right? I mean, we still got essentially an agricultural curriculum, one that was made for the turn of the 20th century. So we had late 1900s platforms where we chop up the day into these little segments as if that's the way people learn, 40 minutes of reading, and then they do 30 minutes of mathematics, and then they do 20 minutes of science. And that's not how anybody thinks. But the new stuff you're being asked to do, if it was on the right platform, could cut across it. So you get a standard, you read the standard, and you ask yourself, what does this mean for this setting? Or what does this mean for these young people? What's also going to be layered onto all of this stuff now is the need to meet the kids' social emotional needs. They became more apparent in the midst of the pandemic that kids weren't missing doing long division. They were missing friends. They were missing other caring adults. And you have to make time for that if you're going to be successful. We got to begin to check in with kids on a regular basis to see just how are you doing? What can we do to make things a little bit better? So my suggestion would be to sort of go through what are the standards asking me to do, and where do the aspects of my pedagogy that focus on the kids' culture, where do they fit into this? And where can I add it in if it's not here? Where are the places where we can begin to have kids ask critical questions of a standard? I'm really, really hoping we can do some really major curriculum transformation. It just blows my mind that we are in the 21st century. We're the most highly technological society in the world, and we don't have science at the center of everything we're doing. And I'm not saying this as a science person. I'm actually a social studies person. If anybody wants to do old stuff, it's me, because I was a history teacher forever, right? But to me, it would be much better if we were asking important science questions and then bringing in our English language arts, our mathematics. I mean, to me, the most baffling mathematics question is, how did we go from two people having come from Wuhan, China in February of 2020 to over 500,000 people dead. I mean, you want to talk about things like, understanding exponents, just putting that little number over, over another numeral doesn't do it for me. I don't understand what that is. I just know that you do it there and then you multiply it a couple times, but I don't know what it means. But if you tell me, we started with 2 in February, and then by December, we had millions of people infected and we had this many people. Now it's like, okay, that's not just adding a person, that's an exponential growth. Or you might be saying in English language arts, what are some really great books or stories you read to kids about pandemics? Or, it's not like we haven't had one before. What are some, science, it's great to go into science fiction as a genre, right? There are some wonderful stories and films that get at that. And then you develop your language skills out of, because you got to read something, right? And unfortunately, for so many years, we've been reading nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, just words. It's one of the reasons why the kids are not making sense of what we're doing. So my hope is that we use this as an opportunity to really rethink a lot of stuff we're doing. But you're probably going to have to do it convincing folks that you're not subverting or veering away from, quote, their standards or whatever, or their assessments or whatever it is that they think that they're supposed to do.
Dr. Billings, one of our attendees was concerned that she was, trying, to be authentic in every way and just trying to make sure that she was making a difference. She had pre-K early learners, and that she is making a difference on her part to help alleviate any disparities or gaps in her classroom. And I cited in your the study that you did, the mini study with pre-K. Maybe you can speak to that.
So, the beauty of pre-K is that, the amount of stuff you actually have to cover from the academic side is not that onerous. And that there are all kinds of things that you can do that make good homeschool homeschool connections. I was talking to some pre-K providers not too long ago, and I explained to them, first of all, most of our kids experience pre-K at home. Most of our kids are in home care. So whether it's grandmom or a neighbor, and these people, for the most part, they love these kids. It's not, you go to grandma's house, you're going to get a real breakfast. Okay. You're not getting no continental breakfast at grandma's house. You're getting bacon, eggs, toast, grits, sausage, orange juice. And then she's going to give you a great big old kiss. I mean, you're going to love that. But when grandma's stories come on, she ain't got time. You got to go sit down and be quiet. She got to see her soap operas. If she knew that there were a few things that she could do, she'd do them. So one of the big things we need to do is be able to, in a fairly succinct and clear way, list the kinds of things that we want to make sure that pre-K students experience. We probably don't do enough talking with children. We spend a lot of time with these little kids telling them what to do. But some of the best pre-K early learning experiences that I've seen worldwide, and I'm talking like places like Reggio Emilia, Italy, rely a lot on what kids want to know as opposed to what we want to tell them. So there are simple questions like, well, tell me what you want to know about yourself. Tell me what you want to know about the world. What I've learned is when you ask those two questions of young children, the answers, the things they want to know tend to be scientific. They don't want to know how to write a letter B. I've never had a kid say that. But I've had kids want to know what I would call big questions. And we feel like, oh, well, no, that's too advanced for you, so I'm not going to answer it. You know, when a kid says something like, how many stars are in the sky? Man, that's a great question. It's an absolutely great question. We typically say, oh, nobody knows. Well, that's not exactly true. There are people who devote their lives, they're called astronomers, to documenting stars. So that's a whole path you could go down. Or, again, my math people, estimation, where you begin to say, you know, how many we are seeing in this place. You can give kids all kinds of examples of really large sets and what happens when you cordon off a set. How many are in this set, okay? And how many more sets do you think we have? Do you see how different that kind of conversation can be? It's not like we're looking for a right answer. We're looking for opportunities to give children the opportunity to solve problems. Another question that one of the little ones said that she wanted to know was, how come my shadow is big at some time in the day and it's little at other times? Talk about a great question. So now we're all into the revolutions around the sun, and I mean, it's just a wonderful question. It's a science question. Or another question about, why are the leaves green in the summertime, but then they're brown when we go, after we go back to school? Oh man, now we got a whole big thing about deciduous trees, and we can get into photosynthesis. And, there's all kind of analogies we can make. We can get kids into forensics where, go pick your tree. And every season, we're going to make you go out and draw a picture of your tree. And what do you notice about your tree? So what I'm saying is, I think we shortchange our children because we think they can't learn certain things. A lot of people have been talking about in this sort of pandemic moment about learning loss. I'm not entertaining that notion. Our kids didn't stop learning. They did not stop learning. Now, did they lose the opportunity to learn that boring stuff that we've been teaching them that's going to be on the assessment? Yeah, well, good for them. But I think we need to capitalize on the fact that as human beings, they are always learning. There is no time in which they are not learning. We're just not assessing what they actually learn.
Wow.
Dr.
We also-
Dr. Ladson, oh, sorry, Nina. I was
No,
going
go ahead.
to revoice one of the questions that came up in the chat from Emily. Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but she's a higher ed professional who's training teachers specifically in math education to go into the Baltimore school system. I think that's right. But she asked, what do you see are the similarities and differences between culturally relevant pedagogy and anti-racist pedagogy? And I think you touched on this a little bit in your video about like, this is just the work we do, that authentic inquiry is in and of itself anti-racist, but I would love to see, because those different terminologies come up so often, what do you see as the crossover between them or the differences?
Well, I think once you label something, then you got to make it into something. Decades ago, we didn't have any kids with learning disabilities. Then we created a category. Once you create the category, you got to fill it. I'm not suggesting there aren't kids that don't have learning disabilities. I'm suggesting that when you reify the label, then that's what it becomes. And then there's not clarity about meaning sometimes. So for example, for many, many, many years, my colleagues in the UK have used the term anti-racist. It was there to mean one thing. We're not doing the thing the government is doing. The government liked the term multicultural. So when they would hear Americans talk about multicultural, they thought, oh, that's that weak stuff. We're doing anti-racist. I think the place for the anti-racist work has to start with the adults. Because racism is a learned behavior. Yes, it's in the air. Yes, it is. There are messages and symbols sent to our young people all the time. But unless the adults with whom they are placed take on an anti-racist stance and are deliberate and persistent and saying, I'm going to read more, I'm going to learn more, I'm going to listen more, I'm going to be engaged more, I don't think there's anything you can do to just make them anti-racist. So that's the part, the place to stand. I was in a talk the night of I think it was Paul Gorski's anti-racist teaching group. That was Wednesday, so it was the same night that the murder of George Floyd was sentenced. And you notice I'm not using his name because I don't want to talk about that person. I want to talk about what happened. One of the questions was, well, what do we do tomorrow regarding that? And I said, well, first of all, why are you assuming that this is on every kid's mind or on most of your kids' minds? If I'm in Columbus, maybe what's on my mind is that Micaiah just got killed, right? So a lot of times it's our agenda that we are pushing to, quote, make the anti-racist. And that, what I recommended to them is that you start your day with, is there something that happened since we were last together that people want to talk about? Let them initiate. Don't assume that because you're all exercised over it, that's where they want to go. And I think that's the piece that started with the first question about learning to listen to our children and our young people.
Okay, we're coming up on 2 minutes before we switch over to the next group. So does anyone have anything quick they'd like to say or to ask? Or if Dr. Ladson Billings wants to give us a final statement so that we don't come to a hard stop and then you go.
Well, let me just say that, as I've been saying for the past 11 months, that this pandemic has given us an opportunity. It's not just been all bad. It has given us a chance to stop and look at what we're doing and reassess. But it also should be giving you an opportunity to give those around you some space and some grace. We're not going to fix this thing like this because we've taken all this time to break it. When people are saying, oh my God, I didn't know about these disparities. Okay, that says less about the disparities and more about where you've been. So we've known for a very long time that we've offered unequal educational opportunities to young people. This is a time when we can begin to fix them. And I think, when people say, well, the tests are never going away, that's not true. I met with ETS and with the College Board. They think their tests are going away because many of the top universities are going test optional. So they're trying to think of new ways to begin to assess. So while we keep obsessing over what was, the people who, are doing the work of assessment are saying, you know what, we got to come up with better stuff, with more authentic stuff. And I think that teachers have an opportunity to kind of push this agenda to say, you know what, here's a better way to determine what our kids are learning and what they know. So I would take hope. I love Arundhati Roy's notion that this pandemic.
Thank you. Do I leave the room, Natalie, or I stay right here?
You stay right here. We're going to get moved. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Will pick us up and drop us somewhere else.
Okay, I'm in a new breakout room.
Yeah, Dr. Ladson Billings, we're rotating to a new breakout room. Thanks for, we got a little bit of whiplash as we move to the next.
Yeah.
No, but that was good. That was great.
I believe we also have Dr. Ellington still with us here. So I think we're still a little bit in transition.
Okay.
But hello, new breakout room. We'll wait for a few seconds to see. There we go.
I think they whipped her out. Yeah.
I think we got it now.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see all of your faces. We're glad that you've joined us this morning. My name is Nita Smith. I'm a K-12 music educator in Nashville, Tennessee, a member of cohort 5 of EDCO. Madison, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Madison No. I was in cohort 3 of the Educators Cooperative. I was a classroom mathematics teacher for 8 years and am now a doctoral student at Vanderbilt, and I'm really thrilled to have Dr. Ladson Billings here today to talk to us about anti-racist pedagogy and culturally responsive pedagogy. And Nita, would you like to, I don't know if we need to do introductions every time because we have such a short amount of time, but
I know.
yeah.
Dr. Ladson Billings, would you like for me to introduce, or we just want to
Why
jump
don't we
right
just
in?
go in
Okay.
and because we were sort of in and out really quickly last time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are there any questions in the chat? Let me look and see if anyone, how many people, raise your hand, were able to listen to the pre-discussion? So I see one.
It looks like
Myself,
most people seem to have done that.
Okay, great. Does anyone have a question they'd like to unmute, or do we have a question in the chat? Let me see. Hey, Becky. Okay, someone just go ahead and unmute. Let's get this ball rolling. Don't be shy.
You know, I always tell teachers when they tell me things about their kids, I said, your kids do what you do. When you come into a workshop, you sit in the back. When they ask are any questions, you don't ask the questions. They're our kids. They don't come from another planet. They look, act, talk, and behave just like us. Okay, y'all gonna make me go back to work to room 1. They was popping over there.
We did have a little chance to brainstorm, so there may have been a little boost up that we got a chance a few minutes beforehand.
Okay.
I know that something that was particularly interesting to me, and other people may be able to like branch off of this, was the idea of comfort that was brought up in the video. That sometimes this idea of culturally responsive pedagogy may feel uncomfortable to some teachers who are working within a set of standards, or but we also talked about this idea of joy in authentic inquiry and responsiveness. So I think that's particularly interesting, that idea of discomfort, but also joy in the same space. And if you could speak into that, or if anyone else has things that kind of stirs up in their brain.
You know, well, part of my own training is in anthropology. And so I find it just distinctly American that people think they're entitled to comfort. I mean, most people in the world are not comfortable. You know, I've been in communities where people have had little or nothing. They weren't comfortable. It's like, this is just life. This is how we do it. And in fact, many of the kids that you serve are not particularly comfortable. They're doing the best they can. So this notion that we should always be comfortable is something that I think we should dispel. That if you're not experiencing what might be thought of as a little bit of disequilibrium, then you're probably not growing. You know, you're just sitting where you are. Now, the issue of joy is different because, you know, joy is more of an internal state. You know, those of you who've ever been in a Black church know we say something like, this joy I have.
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't give it, and the world
Can't
can't
take it away.
So if that's the kind of way you're approaching your life, it's like, just because the teacher's not nice to you, or just because something didn't go your way, you kind of pull on that reservoir of saying, you know, there's something inside me that really makes me joyful. And a lot of times I think, you know, we're equating the notion of that people have to be happy as opposed to being joyful. I think those are very different states. That joy is really a kind of almost state of being. Happiness is situational. You know, if you bring me in a bowl of ice cream right now, I'll be happy, right? But probably 20 minutes later, I'll be sad because, like, why did you eat all that ice cream, right? But when I think of certain experiences that I've had, I'm joyful. Yeah. Wow, can't believe that happened. Oh, or when I think of some people, I think of my grandchildren, they just bring me joy. And so one of the things that I think as a teacher you want to do is you want to think about, what is it about this experience with these young people brings me joy? I'm sad to say that I don't see a lot of joy among teachers. And I'm not talking about the fact that they got a crazy principal or there's a new directive. I'm talking about just in their interaction with the kids. So as someone who has supervised thousands of student teachers in, in a 30+ year career of higher ed, the very first observation that I do with student teachers, and I tell them, I said, I'm not coming to see anything about how the lesson goes. I'm not coming to see how you manage discipline. I'm coming to look at your interaction with these children or young people. That's all I want to see. If you make mistakes, if you make errors, I don't really care on this first visit. And sometimes there are these hard conversations I have to have at the end of the observation in which I ask the question, do you even like these kids? Mm. Because what I saw was no real authentic interaction with these kids. I saw you go through the steps of your lesson. Yeah, the kids listen, or no, somebody didn't listen. Some kids seemed engaged, but I didn't see anything from you. I didn't see you smile, not one time. I didn't see you just, you didn't crack a little joke. You didn't, I had one woman, I actually sent her to an acting class because she was just that flat in her affect. And what I'm suggesting is, if we don't make a human connection, it doesn't matter what the curriculum is they give you, what the assessments are, whether it's anti-racist, whether it's, culturally responsive. If you don't connect with the human beings who are in that room, we have no place to go. And so that's it's like I have young people that I have taught a million years ago, and when I think of the name or their picture of them shows up in my mind, I just crack up. Somebody put a thing on social media the other day and said, did anybody else have to do square dancing when they were in elementary school? And I had to laugh because, I'd learned square dancing in the 4th grade, and I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I didn't grow up in the country. I didn't grow up in no rural. I learned square dancing in 4th grade. I went to a HBCU and took a dance class, a folk dance class, and so I learned square dancing again. And then I went off to teach middle school students, and someone asked a question about what did people do back then, we're studying the colonial period, for leaders. They didn't have no television. What was they doing? And one of the things was that they danced. And kids are like, what kind of deal? What you mean dance? So we got into this whole thing about leisure activities during the colonial period, and I taught them how to square dance. We once again in Philadelphia, we're not in the country. We got so good at the square dance, and I said, what, we're gonna do an assembly program, and we'll give the context of why we are doing this and why we're learning it. One of the most troubled kids in the school was in my class. And I'm telling you, that boy could square dance like nobody's business. And I remember the principal saying to me, is that Dennis up there on the stage? I said, it sure is. Sure is. I said, he do-si-doing with the best of them. So it's this notion of the humanity. I was able to reach his humanity through something very different. He couldn't read. If all I did was sit there with that social studies book every day, he and I both would be frustrated, and he would stop seeing my humanity and I would stop seeing his. So the thing I think we're learning coming out of pandemic is that we have to reach out to people on a very human level if we're going to be any good at the work we want to do.
Beautiful. I'm going to ask Becky to chime in and give us a question. I'm picking on somebody that I know that I found out's in the chat.
Yeah, she has the name. She has the name of this woman at my church, and when I saw her name pop up, I'm like, "It's Becky Peterson." That's her name.
Here we are. It's so good to see you, Nita. So good to see you, Madison, and Dr. Ladson Billings. Thank you for joining us today. So in my role right now, I do work with pre-service teachers at Vanderbilt, and we have a lot of white women come into this profession, and this notion of discomfort is a challenging one because I am trying to push them into spaces where they are disrupting whiteness, right? And figuring out what that means for them. And sometimes I don't know the best way to support them in this work without, and I think it's a balance of, okay, we need to get a little bit more, sorry, all my kids are here too. We are trying to push you, right, to recognize what the work is going to look like for you in the future. And I think that's my biggest challenge is how far to push in this work.
So I think the first thing you might do with them is have them recall a moment in which they were at their most uncomfortable. Okay. And it doesn't have to have anything with school to do with school. You know, maybe they were learning to swim, or maybe it was the first time that they got to drive the car on their own. You know, they'd gone through the driver training and now they were actually having to drive somewhere. And then ask them to recall what you do to overcome it. What you do to get yourself through that. And then begin to talk about, so what are the strategies that you use when you are in an uncomfortable situation? So if somebody said, well, I do X to avoid it, okay, that's a strategy, but does that fix it? You know, so it's like you just have to keep pushing them to think about those moments where they've already experienced discomfort. And then I would even just talk about that whole notion of comfort versus discomfort. You know, if you've been to a doctor or a dentist, they use the term, they say, this is going to be a little uncomfortable. Okay, no, this is going to hurt. This is exactly what they mean by that. They're not, you know, uncomfortable is, you know, you have put on the COVID-15 and you go back to put on that skirt and you're going to wear it, but it ain't fit, right? That's uncomfortable. You know, uncomfortable is them fly shoes they only had them in a half size smaller than what you normally get. And you getting them anyway, because they just too fly and they got them on sale. Every time you wear them, you are uncomfortable, right? But what physicians and dentists are talking about is pain. And that's not what we're talking about with these young people. Where's your place of uncomfort or discomfort? And how'd you work yourself through it? You know, all of them have done it in some degree. Sometimes, you know, some are social discomfort. And I think it's very clear that we actually have a generation of young people who are actually having more social, emotional, and mental health issues. And I'm not talking about the kids in school. I'm talking about the people we are preparing at the university level. You know, we have between 10 and 12% of our freshmen every year who come already diagnosed. I mean, their parents would tell you, you know, this is my daughter and she's seeing a therapist and we need to find somebody here. They ask up front. I love those people because at least they, you know, but there's a whole other latent group for whom, you know, being a high school student, they finally were comfortable because they were home and they had everything they needed. And then going away to college just triggers everything. You know, we used to just call it, oh, you're homesick. Well, some of them will be that, but some of them will begin to manifest issues of anxiety and depression. So I think, you know, I'm not asking you to be a therapist, but I am asking you to get them to think about how they've dealt with discomfort in the past and what they use to, you know, what helps them through it. And to say to them, you should expect to be uncomfortable because it's a new setting. New settings are almost always uncomfortable. I mean, I love travel and I've been everywhere. I've been around the world to 6 of the 7 continents. The only place I haven't been is Antarctica, and I'm not going there, okay? So if you got a cousin there, don't have them calling me because I'm not coming there. I live in Wisconsin. I don't need to be no colder. But every place I go, there's a moment of discomfort because I don't quite, you know, I like public transportation. So I end up, you know, taking it if they have it. But I'm a little bit discomforted because, you know, it's like if I get off at the wrong stop, am I going to really be messed up here? I mean, you know, so we all have moments of discomfort. They just need to identify what they are and then talk about how they work themselves through it. And you should say to them, don't withhold from me as someone who was helping to supervise you when you are feeling uncomfortable, because I can't help you if you don't tell me. And that's probably what happens is they get in a situation, they're uncomfortable, and their defense mechanism is to not engage and not, to be like some of those young folks that I've seen that don't look like they like the kids, because they're so uncomfortable that they don't know what's the next thing to do. So you got to have that sort of open conversation with them about, this is to be human is to be uncomfortable, right?
Thank you so much. That last little nugget too, to be human is to be uncomfortable.
It's also to be at risk. To be human is to be at risk. So don't pick off this little group of kids and say they're at risk. We're all at risk. Yeah. The pandemic placed every single one of us at risk. Every one of us. We don't call ourselves at risk. And so we need to stop calling our children that.
Yes. Goodness, thank you so much.
Sure.
And Alice, I see what you've dropped into the chat. I think Dr. Ladson Billings just kind of spoke to both of you in that same vein. So thank you. Thank you for your honesty in the chat. Appreciate it. So we got about 2 minutes. If anyone wants to, including Dr. Ladson Billings, give a reflection or a summary or anything that we can knock out in 2 minutes, and so we won't have to come to a hard stop and just zoom away. Anyone? How about you, Michelle? A statement?
I'm just so very appreciative to hear from you. I learned so much from you. I watched the video yesterday and was very inspired by your words and your wisdom. I loved hearing about how you bring concepts and ideas to life through meaningful and purposeful connections, and just love thinking about how to bring more joy to our work. So I'm very grateful. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. We got, I think, as I recall, we just got to a place where we just started having fun. Yeah. We forgot you guys were going to watch this.
Thank you.
Lindsay, would you like to say anything right quick?
Sure. Yeah, I'm so in a position where I coach teachers, and I find kind of what you were stating that I wouldn't have put into words before. But the more difficult piece, like I can coach content pretty easily, like how to the nuts and bolts of a lesson plan, right? But like coaching, I always kind of like, how do you coach personality or coach personality out of people? And so I was intrigued with what you're saying. Like I used to, when I run PDs, like try to do it in a really bland, like boring way and be like, well, why aren't you guys participating kind of thing? So I would be curious if you had more, I don't know, I guess resources for doing that. That's something I might try to keep exploring. But I like someone put in the chat, like improv or different things, just like loosen some people up, especially first year teachers, yeah, so thank you for getting me thinking.
So a good activity would be to have all of your students be able to tell a joke. It's really a skill, and, some of them, they just can't tell a joke. They're just terrible, But once you learn how to tell a joke and, get your timing and the reactions, that's a place to begin and start with them. I think we're being booted into other places, so.
I'll stay with stuff coming from and what you're up to. It's ongoing. It never stops. It's never handled. I know that's disturbing, right? It's never handled. Just like relationships are never handled, y'all. Marriages are never handled, and nothing's ever handled with human beings. Because if it was, we'd be like, oh. No. Trust me, no. Parenting is never handled. None of it is handled. So give up the trying to handle.
Okay, I think I got my new people. I see Madison still here. I don't know if Nita's going to join us or not, but why don't we get started, and if she joins us, we'll get going.
She may have gone to the main session. Oh, it looks like she's
Here
back.
she is. No,
Welcome back, Nina.
Hey.
We would love to introduce you all to Dr. Ladson Billings, who has so graciously joined us for these conversations. I'm excited to hear from her. We'd love for y'all to read more about her bio, but we'd love to just dive right in with any questions that you all have. For her, my name's Madison No. I'm in the Educator Cooperative Cohort 3 and would really love to help field conversations. If you want to put things in the chat, I'm happy to help relay those as well.
Hi, my name is Nita Smith. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us. I came through cohort 5, which was the very first virtual one. So I'm just so glad to be here and so glad to welcome Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings. And so without further ado, just unmute yourself and just jump right in. Come on, Alicia.
Nita. I love Dream Keepers, and I know that's way back, but Dr. Billings, thank you for writing that. And I have gotten to participate with you once before in the program at Vanderbilt. But one of the things about Dream Keepers, I love the way you analyze that so logically from what are the behaviors that different teachers do and how white teachers can also be culturally responsive. Because there was a time when I thought I had to, as a younger teacher, I asked the older Black teachers at my school, is it okay for me to do these topics, to talk to kids this way and address it? Like I needed permission. And they said to me, Alicia, if you don't, who will? What if they don't get it? So yes, please teach it. So I want to thank you for the book and the way that you shared how a variety of different teachers can do this well. It's been such a learning thing for me. I'm speechless about questions. I just love to hear you talk. Somebody else have a good question?
So thank you for that, Alicia. But I would also say that one of the things that I heard in your remarks was that I went and asked some people that I thought would know, right? In this case, you said I asked the Black teachers. Not enough of that happens. That most novices struggle alone and in silence. And so any errors that they make end up being compounded. It's really, really important that we turn to people with expertise and say, you know, I'm thinking about doing so and so and so. What do you think? It's not that you need people to tell you what to do, but it's always good to get another sort of set of eyes on your practice. That's one of the shortcomings of our work. You know, if I were training to be a heart surgeon, I could sit in an operating theater and watch an expert heart surgeon do his work. If I were training to be a wonderful criminal defense attorney, I could go in a courtroom, right? I don't have to ask permission. I can just go and, you know, when I know that so-and-so is trying the case, I could sit there and watch it. But where do I go if I actually want to see an expert teacher? So that the fact that you decided, I'm going to ask some teachers was a smart thing to do. And it's one of the things that we should be sharing with novices. Go ask someone.
Dr. Ladson Billings, first, good morning. It's an honor to be here with you. I read your work as well. I'm actually one of Dr. Ellington's students, doctoral students. So I've had many assignments where I had to read your work. So it is an honor.
You at just the best university there could ever be.
Yes.
You know?
So,
and I know that firsthand.
Yes, ma'am. I was listening to the recording and I am still not shaken, but well, as I told the group before, I am the only Black math teacher at a prestigious public high school in Baltimore City. I'm North City College, and I'm also the department head. And so while, as we discussed before, the notion of the one Black representation and white people go to that one Black because we're supposed to know everything, at the same time, I think I put undue pressure on myself as the lone Black to, change the department, change how we do it. And so I often am in conflict with myself. And so there were a lot of takeaways when you were saying the the most important or the best way to be anti-racist is to have the highest quality standard in your teaching, which really spoke to me. And while I relate to my students, majority Black kids, differently than everybody else, of course, but I feel like I can do more. Listening to you talk was to do more. You talking about creating those experiences. And, you know, I do well, but there's more. And so as I'm listening and trying to, I actually don't have a question. I'm just really talking and reflecting on what you said. And when you got to the place where you said you were talking to pre-K or kindergarten students and asked them what they wanted to know about themselves and what they wanted to know about the world, I was listening in the car and I immediately ran in the house and asked my 5-year-old, what do you want to know about yourself? He didn't answer that one, but what do you want to know about the world? He was like, the earth. And it had me reflecting on types of questions he usually asks. He's like, Mama, what happens if lava does this? What happens? So it's like, it's true. And that's something that I've never noticed in him, which means what am I not noticing about my kids as I attempt this anti-racist and as a teacher in my classroom, but also as a leader of 12 other white high school teachers, where although I'm in a predominantly Black school of great and high performance students, their math experience is negative across the board. So what about my own teaching, even as a Black person, is not anti-racist in how to, you know, unravel some things? Because I was taught in the white supremacist culture, math is elite and, you know, has whiteness in it anyway. So unraveling my practices and kind of redoing everything. So I was really, I really enjoyed that talk in the recording. I'm gonna stop talking now.
So, you know, first I got to check you a little bit. So you telling me that Poly is not prestigious anymore?
Oh! For those who don't know, City and Poly were rival. so we don't even mention the other.
But here's the thing. You know, it's been 50 some years since I was at Morgan State as a student. A lot of my classmates went to Baltimore City College, right? They're out there in the world. Why aren't you bringing them into City College? Why don't your kids, even though you're the only Black teacher, there's a whole bunch of informal teachers that you can pull on. And you might do it like maybe every 2 weeks, I'm bringing somebody in here who is Black, who is in the STEM fields, and they're going to come in and spend some time talking with my students about why this is worth learning. Because the kids need to make a connection. And then, you know, the other thing that you know, makes me crazy about my math colleagues is they often teach math out of context. And math has no meaning out of context. You can't just think about it as abstract. Yes, there are abstract concepts within it, but they're linked to something that exists. So, you know, I did the NCTM keynote for them. Last time we were in face-to-face, we were in San Diego. And one of the things I asked the people in the audience is I put up my slide said 4 + 3 =? And I said, what does this mean? And people started hollering 7. I said, I didn't ask you to solve this. I asked you what it means. They couldn't really tell me. I said, now you can't tell me, and that's why our kids are stumped, because they don't know what this means. So you might say 4 apples and 3 oranges. Still, what does that mean? There's no such a thing as an apple orange. Now you can elevate it and say, well, it's produce, but maybe if I'm in 1st grade, I don't know that term, right? So we always have to put the mathematics in context. You know, you might help students, you know, give students credit for finding mathematics in their own world. So someone comes in and says, this week we, you know, had 12 shootings in the city. 12 out of how many people who live in the city? What's the ratio of police shootings, or not police shootings, but just shootings in this city? I mean, math is all around them. And yet we don't make the connections. And you talked about your own 5-year-old. Your own 5-year-old has some math questions that will blow your mind. And it's not just about 1 plus some little box equals 4. That's not exciting. It doesn't mean anything. You know, as I said in the other group, your own 5-year-old asks you a question like, how many stars in the sky? Oh, wow, you're talking about a math question. And it's not like the only answer is, oh, it's too big, we don't know. No, there are people who work on that. There's astronomers, that's what they do. And mathematicians estimate stuff all the time. And so these skills that mathematicians use, we're not using in the teaching of the school subject called mathematics. Mathematicians, and you know, do your kids, for example, in high school, are they maintaining journals? Probably not. But they ought to be having a mathematics journal that explains, this is how I go about solving certain things. This is what I do when I get stuck. This, I mean, literally writing about things, and start asking them, you know, what Kate Tolliver calls those impossible questions. You know, if you've ever seen her work, she asked her, because she's in New York City, she asked the kids to figure out how many dogs in New York City. And if you've seen the video, the little kids, like, just start counting dogs. And I was like, I'm not getting anywhere. But what did he end up doing? He lived in a high-rise building. He figured out what's the average number of dogs in the high-rise building. What's the average number of high-rise buildings in my borough? Okay, then times how many boroughs in New York. It's not to get an exact answer. We got to get kids away from that, to get an estimate. Even the CDC is telling us every day how many people are dying. It's not an exact number. Because first of all, they're relying on the reporting. And so the reporting may be inaccurate. It's their best estimate. And that's probably the things that our kids are worst at when it comes to assessment, is estimation. So, I mean, you got a ready-made group because your group wants to go to college. They want to go to college. They intend to go to college. What you want to do is make sure you don't turn them off from a career choice. They're not all going to be mathematicians, but you don't want them to get to a place where they can't even make they can't even opt into that.
So, Dr. Ladson Billings, thank you for your book, Dream Keepers. I'm a special education elementary teacher here in Nashville, Tennessee. And my question to you is, how can I continue to be an advocate for Black and brown children being placed in special education, you know, both in the classroom and when I go into meetings with families?
Well, to me, getting into special education should be a very high bar. You know, you need to be clear that you just don't get into special ed because you don't behave. You know, there's a lot of reasons why we find our kids being placed there that have everything to do with where they are developmentally and nothing to do with any kind of disability. So some disabilities are obvious. If a youngster has, you know, Fragile X or Down syndrome or, you know, something like that, we know that they have some cognitive disability, but they don't all belong there, and they don't get well served if they get in a place where they don't belong. I don't know how many people recognize, if you saw the presidential inauguration and you saw a young woman by the name of Amanda Gorman. I've known Amanda for 4 years now, because I was on a panel that selected her to be the U.S. National Youth Poet Laureate. And I tell people all the time, Amanda is not extraordinary. She's outstanding, but she's not extraordinary because there's thousands of them out there. They're sitting in our classrooms. But what made Amanda the choice, because the other girl that was, you know, we had got down to 2, you know, both of them exceptional. What made Amanda the choice in my mind is that she had a more compelling story, and that compelling story had to do with her disability. Amanda has a speech impediment, and Amanda has a cognitive processing disability.
Hmm.
But that didn't keep her off the stage at the Capitol. That didn't keep her. She's making stacks now, right? Everybody,
Yeah.
she on the thing of Vogue, and you know, she don't have time for all the gigs she's being asked to book right now. So very high bar before someone should get in. I would also say you want someone objective. Typically what happens when we place kids is everybody who's making the decision already knows them. So they've already formed an opinion. So you get a teacher who makes a referral. You might have an M team that you know, certifies it, but on the M team are colleagues of that teacher. So, you know, Gavin, you my friend, you make the recommendation. Sure, I'm gonna go along with you. No, we need Samantha, who don't know none of us, to look at the data and say, I'm not so sure this is really special. Hey, look like he's struggling with some behavioral stuff, but so high bar, some level of objectivity, and some guarantee that what you do will make things better for the child, not for the teacher. Yeah, it's going to make it better for the teacher because now the teacher got one less kid to deal with. That's not the goal. So I'm someone who doesn't believe in retention of kids because no one can prove to me that kids are going to be better as a result of it. And we know that retention is perhaps the biggest indicator of school dropout because there's a reason why kids need to be with kids of their own age grade cohort. It's developmental. All of you who teach very young children know that there's a world of difference between a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. There's only 2 years. 23 and 25 is not a big deal, but 5 and 7, whew, huge. So you know, like I said, very high bar to get into special ed. It's make it special. Okay, it's so special. You can't just roll up in here. You got to pass the standard to get in here, and just kind of flip the discussion about what it is that we're trying to do. And if you feel like, you know what, we're not making things better for this kid, so why are we doing this?
Yes, ma'am.
So they gave us a warning.
Yes, ma'am. And I will say that we may have one other person that would like to give maybe a 30-second comment before I wrap it up with our thanks. Is there anyone who would just like to make a quick comment before we begin to wrap it up? Connie, I'm just gonna call on people. Unmute your unmute your device.
I thank you. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Your analogy with the fishbowl, as simple as it seems, really had my gears turning. So I thank you for sharing that in the talk and the panel.
Oh, sure.
You're amazing.
Tell that to my children.
Let me call on one other person. Come on, Sherry Scott, give us one closing as a participant.
Oh my gosh. I'm just going to go for it. I am so excited to feel freedom to do what I know I'm good at and not always feel guilty, but to have some power. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Ladson Billings, on behalf of EDCO, I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience. We are so grateful that you spent this time today with us, Thora, and I know what you've given up, so thank you so much.
Okay, I got to go back over there with them people.
And I know you do, and I love you for it. So our participants, thank you for being here. We are now going to go and get into small groups to begin accountability planning and action steps. You're welcome to be flies on the wall or continue to engage or enjoy your Saturday. So thank you so much. So if you want to just continue, just hang on tight. We're going to be moved into breakout rooms. And thank you. Let's everybody give Dr. Ladson Billings.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nita.
Bye-bye.
Here, looking at each other.
Yeah, she's gonna meet us. Just click on that, guys.
Leave room? Do we click on leave
Yeah.
room? Thanks.
Going back to the main.
Able to get some great time with so many teachers all over. I hope you have a fantastic Saturday and the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Farewell. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back, everyone. We're just going to wait for the other groups to get back here, and we'll talk in just a few moments. Nita, you can hit stop on the recording now if you like. I think that on the bottom there you see.